"You'll be the first to come crawling back, begging me to return," my husband said. "I've packed your things, get out." Diana's hands moved with calculated precision as she folded Mitchell's clothes into suitcases, each item representing 7 years of marriage that had slowly transformed from partnership into psychological warfare. The irony wasn't lost on her that Mitchell had just threatened to throw her out of the Phoenix home she'd purchased before they met, apparently forgetting whose name appeared on the deed. "You'll be the first to come crawling back, begging me to return," Mitchell shouted from the living room, his voice carrying that familiar mixture of rage and confidence that had terrorized Diana for months. "I've packed your things. Get out." Diana's response cut through his tantrum with surgical precision, her calm tone more devastating than any screaming match could have been. Mitchell's shock was immediate and profound, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and the first hints of panic as he processed what Diana had actually said. For years, their fights had followed the same pattern. Mitchell would escalate to threats about leaving, Diana would panic and apologize, and their toxic dynamic would reset with him holding even more power over her emotions. But Diana had spent the last 6 months secretly preparing for this moment, opening her own bank account, consulting with a divorce attorney, and documenting Mitchell's psychological abuse with the methodical care of someone planning an escape rather than hoping for reconciliation. His latest explosion about her disrespectful refusal to lend him money for another failed business venture had finally triggered the plan she'd been building in silence. The revelation that Diana owned their house outright, having purchased it 2 years before their marriage with inheritance money Mitchell knew nothing about, was about to shatter his entire understanding of their power dynamic. His assumptions about her financial dependence had been the foundation of his control, and Diana was about to demolish that foundation with facts he'd never bothered to investigate. Mitchell's threats to leave had always been empty manipulation, designed to make Diana desperate to prevent abandonment. He'd never considered that she might call his bluff with genuine enthusiasm. Mitchell's attempts to regain control of the situation crumbled as Diana produced legal documents that proved her sole ownership of everything he'd assumed belonged to them jointly. The house deed, the car titles, even the furniture he'd helped select had been purchased with Diana's money and remained legally hers despite their marriage. The revelation that Diana had been strategically protecting her assets while Mitchell spent years believing he held power over her was devastating to his self-image as the dominant partner. His threats to take half their possessions in a divorce suddenly seemed pathetic when confronted with the reality that there was no their possessions, only Diana's property that she'd allowed him to use. Diana's explanation of community property laws in Arizona, delivered with the precision of someone who'd spent months researching her legal position, revealed how thoroughly she'd prepared for this confrontation. Mitchell's assumption that marriage automatically entitled him to her premarital assets showed how little he understood about the legal realities of their relationship. The discovery that Diana had been documenting his psychological abuse, including recordings of his threats and photographs of property damage from his tantrums, transformed his moment of rage into potential legal liability. His pattern of intimidation and control, which had felt powerful when directed at an isolated woman, suddenly looked like criminal behavior when viewed through the lens of domestic violence statutes. Mitchell's final attempt to assert authority through physical intimidation backfired when Diana calmly informed him that her divorce attorney was expecting her call if she didn't check in within the hour. The implication that she'd anticipated his potential for violence and taken precautions revealed how completely she'd outmaneuvered his attempts at control. When Mitchell realized that Diana's submissive behavior over the past months had actually been strategic preparation for his removal from her life, his confusion shifted to something approaching respect mixed with fear. The woman he'd assumed was dependent on him had been planning his exit while he basked in imaginary power. Mitchell's departure was swift and humiliating, his confident predictions about Diana's inevitable return replaced by desperate attempts to negotiate a reconciliation before he'd even finished loading his belongings into his car. The man who'd spent years threatening to leave suddenly couldn't bear the thought of actually being removed from Diana's comfortable life. Diana's response to his begging was delivered with the same calm precision she'd maintained throughout their confrontation. She explained that his pattern of threats and emotional manipulation had destroyed any possibility of rebuilding trust, and that his assumption she would tolerate abuse indefinitely had been a fundamental miscalculation of her character and resources. The restraining order Diana filed the next day surprised Mitchell, who seemed genuinely confused that his normal behavior toward his wife constituted legal grounds for court intervention. His assumption that marriage provided immunity from harassment and intimidation charges revealed how completely he'd misunderstood the boundaries of acceptable behavior in relationships. Diana's transformation in the weeks following Mitchell's removal was remarkable even to her closest friends, who hadn't realized how much of her energy had been consumed by managing his emotional volatility and protecting herself from his manipulation. The house felt larger, quieter, and more like home without the constant tension of walking on eggshells around someone who used love as a weapon. 6 months later, Diana was thriving in her Phoenix home with a peaceful routine that included hobbies Mitchell had criticized, friendships he'd discouraged, and career advancement he'd sabotaged through constant drama and demands for attention. His occasional attempts to contact her through mutual friends were met with polite but firm reminders about the restraining order. Mitchell's prediction that Diana would come crawling back had proven to be projection of his own desperation rather than insight into her character. The woman he'd assumed was weak and dependent had been strong enough to plan her freedom while maintaining the appearance of compliance, using his own arrogance against him. Sometimes the most powerful response to threats and manipulation was calm preparation followed by decisive action, proving that real strength often looked like patience until the moment it transformed into unstoppable force.